Chapter 1. The Bazaar. Pain. Such pain. My head hurts so much. In a sleep filled with bizarre, whisper-filled dreams that quickly fell apart, Steve, while deeply asleep, felt an excruciating pain in his head, as if he had been hit hard with a stick. No, it was more like being pierced at the temple with a sharp object, accompanied by a stirring motion. Hissing. In a daze, Steve tried to turn over, to cover his head, to sit up, but he couldn't move his hands or feet at all, as if his body had lost control. It seems I haven't really woken up yet. Still in a dream. Maybe later, there will appear a situation where I think I've woken up, but in fact, I'm still asleep. Steve, who was not unfamiliar with such experiences, tried his best to focus his will to completely break free from the darkness and illusion. However, in the state of being half asleep and half awake, the will is always as elusive as smoke. Hard to control, hard to gather. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't help but let his thoughts drift. And random thoughts emerged. Why would I have a sudden headache in the middle of the night? And it's so severe. Could it be a cerebral hemorrhage or something? Damn. Am I going to die young like this? Wake up. Hurry and wake up. It doesn't seem as painful as before, but there's still something like a dull knife slowly cutting in my head. Looks like I can't continue to sleep. How am I going to work tomorrow? What work? With a real headache. Of course, I should take a leave. No need to fear the manager's nagging. Thinking this way, it seems not bad at all. Hee. To sneak a little leisure time. Wave after wave of throbbing pain accumulated a phantom strength in Steve. And finally, with a burst of effort, he arched his back and opened his eyes, completely breaking free from the state of being half asleep and half awake. His vision was first blurry, then tinged with a faint red. In front of him, Steve saw an original wood-colored desk with an open notebook in the center. The paper was coarse and yellowed, with a sentence written in strange letters, the ink deep black and striking. To the left of the notebook, near the edge of the desk, was a stack of books, about 7 or 8 in total. Beside them on the right side of the wall was a gray-white pipe and a wall lamp connected to the pipe. This lamp had a classical Western flavor, about the size of half an adult's head, with an inner layer of transparent glass and the outside surrounded by black metal forming a grid. Below the extinguished wall lamp, a black ink bottle was covered in a faint red glow, its surface protrusions forming a vague angel pattern. In front of the ink bottle, to the right of the notebook, a dark-colored fountain pen lay quietly, its nib twinkling with a faint light, its cap placed next to a brass-colored revolver. A revolver? Steve was stunned. The items in front of him were so unfamiliar, bearing no resemblance to his own room. While stunned and bewildered, he noticed that the desk, notebook, ink bottle, and revolver were all shrouded in a layer of gauze, which was the light coming in from the window. Outside, instinctively, he lifted his head, his gaze gradually moving upward. In the air, above the black, velvet curtain, hung a high, tranquil, crimson full moon. Steve was inexplicably frightened, abruptly stood up, but before his legs were fully straightened, his head throbbed again, causing him to briefly lose strength and fall, his buttocks hitting hard on the wooden chair seat. Snap! The pain did not affect him. Steve pressed his hands against the desk and stood up again, turning his body in panic to survey the environment he was in. It was a small room, with a brown door on each side, and directly opposite the wall was a wooden bunk bed. Between it and the left door was a cupboard, open at the top and with 5 drawers below. At the edge of the cupboard, at the height of a person, gray-white pipes were also embedded in the wall, but they were connected to a strange mechanical device, with gears and bearings exposed in some places. Near the right corner of the desk was a pile of items resembling a coal stove. as well as soup pots, iron pots, and other kitchen utensils. Beyond the right door was a dressing mirror with 2 cracks, its wooden base simple and unadorned. At a glance, Steve vaguely saw himself in the mirror. His current self. Black hair, brown eyes, a linen shirt, a slender figure, ordinary features, with deeper contours. Steve involuntarily took a deep breath, a myriad of helpless and chaotic guesses flooding his mind. The revolver, the classic European-styled furnishings, and that crimson moon unlike Earth's, all indicated something. I didn't travel through time. Did I? Steve's mouth slowly opened. He grew up reading web novels and often fantasized about such things. But facing it for real, he found it hard to accept. This must be what they call wishing for something until it happens, Steve self-mockingly thought. After a few seconds, if not for the persistent pain in his head, making his thoughts tense and clear, he would definitely doubt he was dreaming. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. After taking a few deep breaths, Steve tried to keep himself from panicking. At this moment, as he harmonized his body and mind, fragments of memory suddenly popped up, slowly presenting themselves in his mind. Clyne Moretti, a resident of Tingen City, Alward County, in the Kingdom of Loan on the northern continent, a recent graduate of the history department at Hoi University. His father was a sergeant in the Royal Army, who died in the colonial conflicts on the southern continent, and the compensation allowed Clyne to attend a private grammar school, laying the foundation for his admission to university. His mother was a believer in the goddess of the night and passed away the year Clyne passed the entrance exam for Hoi University. He also had a brother and a sister, living together in a 2-bedroom apartment. The family was not wealthy, even somewhat poor, currently relying on his brother who worked as a clerk in an import and export company. As a graduate of the history department, Clyne had mastered the ancient Fossick language, considered the root of the languages of the northern continent countries, and the Hermes language, often found in ancient tombs and related to sacrifices and prayers. Hermes language? Steve's mind raced. He pressed his hand against his throbbing temple, and looked at the open notebook on the desk, feeling the text that had seemed strange become unfamiliar, then familiar, and finally readable. It was written in Hermes language. The deep black ink stated, "Everyone will die, including me." Hiss. Steve inexplicably felt frightened, instinctively leaning back, trying to distance himself from the notebook and the text. He was very weak, nearly falling, hurriedly pressed his hand against the edge of the desk, feeling the air around him become agitated, with a whispering echo in his ears, reminiscent of being told horror stories by elders when he was a child. Shaking his head, it was all an illusion. Steve steadied himself and shifted his gaze away from the notebook, taking deep breaths. Then, his eyes fell on the brass-gleaming revolver, and a question suddenly emerged in his mind. With Clyne's family situation, where did the money and means to buy a revolver come from? Steve frowned in thought. In the midst of his contemplation, he suddenly noticed a half-read handprint appearing on the edge of the desk. Its color deeper than the moonlight, thicker than the gauze. It was a blood handprint. Blood handprint? Steve instinctively turned over the hand he had pressed against the edge of the desk, looking down, only to see his palm and fingers covered in blood. At the same time, the throbbing in his head continued, slightly lessened but persistent. Did I hit my head? Steve wondered as he turned around and walked towards the cracked dressing mirror. After a few steps, a medium-built figure with black hair and brown eyes, bearing a noticeable scholarly air, clearly entered his view. Is this the current me? Clyne Moretti? Steve paused for a moment, because the light was not enough in the middle of the night, making it hard to see clearly. So he continued forward until he was just one step away from the mirror. Using the gauze like crimson moonlight, he turned his head to check the condition of his temple. The clear reflection in the mirror truthfully showed a gruesome wound at his temple, with burn marks around the edges, covered in blood, and with grayish-white brain matter slowly wriggling inside.